This is the CitizenLink Report.
If you find our insights helpful, would you support our video efforts? $500 buys an hour of studio time. And we usually don't use a whole hour, but it covers the crew, lights, cameras, all that. That means your gift of $25 or more goes a long ways. Just click on Donate. Thanks from all of us. A lot of gifts were shared around a week or so ago. It is a good time for us to remember what it cost for us to have the gift of freedom. This is the CitizenLink Report. Hi, I'm Stuart Shepard, along with our Executive Director, Tom Minnery. Hi, Tom.
Hello, Stuart.
This season is a time that we spend in reflection, remembering how we got from where we were to where we are.
Well, indeed, and I have been thinking about a particular verse in John's Gospel that has meant a lot to me recently because I saw it in a most unusual place. The verse is well known. Greater love hath no man than this, that he laid down his life for his friend. Stuart, I saw that verse on a stained glass window in a small church just off of Omaha Beach in Normandy. Wow. We took some Focus friends and toured Normandy battle sites and Battle of the Bulge battle sites not long ago. And this was one of the bloodiest sites in the Normandy invasion. This small church had been captured by the Americans just off the beach, but the battle raged back and forth. Now, in this church, 2 American medics set up an aid station. They were fixing up wounded American soldiers. A couple of hours later, the Germans captured the town and that little church at Angeville. And the German officers went in to see what was going on. They saw Americans working on Americans, and they said, "Will you work on Germans?" And the medic said, "We'll work on anybody, just everybody leave your guns at the door." So the Germans began bringing in Germans. And then hours later, the town was taken back by the Americans, and the medics were still working. Now, unbeknownst to this, there were 2 German snipers in the belfry of that church watching this whole thing. And they thought, these Americans aren't the monsters that we were told they were. And so the 2 German snipers did a most unusual thing. They came down and they surrendered to the Americans. Wow. That battle, that church has been commemorated by a restoration of the church, and in one of the stained glass windows is that verse, greater love hath no man than this, that he lays his life down for his friends. A lot of people died in that church, in that town that day for people who needed to be freed and who the Americans did not know, but they gave the sacrifice anyway. And in times like that, verses like this come to mind.
A lot of people in that little church have probably sent their prayers up to God, and prayer played an important part in World War II.
Oh, did it ever? Let me fast forward here a while to one of the great climactic battles of World War II, the Battle of the Bulge. This was the last-ditch effort by the Nazis to break through the American lines, but the war was nearly at an end. Yet they concentrated all their forces around the town of Bastogne in the Ardennes forest. General Patton's Third Army was trying to get to the beleaguered defenders in Bastogne, but they had a problem. It was winter time, and the rain just would not cease. And he had 250,000 men. He wanted to march, but he couldn't march through the rain and the mud. He called the chief chaplain, and he said, "Padre, order up a prayer for weather." And so they did. The chief chaplain wrote a prayer for the weather, and it was distributed within a few days to every one of the 250,000 troops in Patton's Third Army. Let me read you that prayer. Almighty and most merciful Father, we humbly beseech Thee of Thy great goodness to restrain these immoderate rains with which we have had to contend. I suspect that word immoderate was normally more colorful than that. Grant us fair weather for battle. Graciously hearken to us as soldiers who call upon Thee, that armed with Thy power we may advance from victory to victory and crush the oppression and wickedness of our enemies and establish Thy justice among men and nations. Now, when I mentioned this to somebody, they said, now, did he order those soldiers to pray that prayer? Well, almost. He did not order the soldiers to pray that prayer, but he did sort of order the 3,000 officers in the Third Army to instruct their men to pray. and that was actually a training letter that he sent to those officers. And let me read part of that training letter. As chaplains, it is our, actually this went out from the chief chaplain in Patton's words. As chaplains, it is our business to pray. We preach its importance. We urge its practice. But the time is now to intensify our faith in prayer, not alone with ourselves, but with every believing man, Protestant, every Catholic, Jew, every Christian in the ranks of the 3rd United States Army. And then it goes on to say, those who pray do more for the world than those who fight. And if the world goes from bad to worse, it is because there are more battles than prayers. Hands lifted up smash more battalions than hands that strike. And he went on to describe the Battle of Gideon, and he concludes by saying, we must urge, instruct, and indoctrinate every fighting man to pray as well as fight in Gideon's day and in our own. Spiritually alert minorities carry the burdens and bring the victories. What a message, what a training letter for our day, isn't it?
Now, in the movie version of this, I would expect that the strings would start to build and we'd see the clouds and they'd sit there for a minute, but then the strings would build a little more and then the clouds would start to part and they'd march on in. But this is real life we're talking about. What happened in real life? Well,
as a matter of fact, this training letter and the prayer was circulated in the middle of December, and about a week later, presumably after those 250,000 men got the prayer and began praying that prayer, in about a week's time, the skies did lift and that Nazi advance was absolutely crushed.
Wow, that is a great story. It is good for us to reflect and to remember these times. And folks in Europe spend a lot of time remembering some things that we've forgotten in our own country.
Well, they do. And one of the highlights of this tour that we took was to remember the fallen Americans who still lay there in the magnificent American cemetery just off the beach at Omaha Beach. And the veterans in our group got to raise that flag, the flag that everybody will remember from the movie Saving Private Ryan. And it was a gratifying thing to know that continuing on to this day, people go to these places. The Ardennes Forest itself is very peaceful today around Bastogne, but they have even preserved the foxholes where the Band of Brothers Easy Company and thousands of others were holed up in that terrible winter of December 1944. And so it is good to remember, and it is fun to see that the remembrance is still being done.
As we wrap this up, what's the lesson here for us in 2013? What should we do today?
I think that training letter to the officers way back in 1944 says it well, because there are many battles to fight and many ways to fight the battles, but the principle is the same. We must urge, instruct, and indoctrinate every fighting man to pray as well as fight. In Gideon's day and in our own, spiritually alert minorities carry the burdens and bring the victories.
All right. Tom, thanks for reminding us to remember.
You're welcome.
And thank you for watching. We always appreciate hearing from you. You may write to us with your questions, your comments, your criticisms. We read them all. You may write to us at mail@citizenlink.com. We don't get to respond to every note that comes in, but we do read every single message that we get. Do pray for our nation as we move forward, that particularly our elected officials would have the wisdom to remember where we've been so that they can direct the country to where we need to go. And remember, stand tall and be heard.